Hi, I'm Mitch Horowitz, and we're in the Tarcher offices talking with author Daniel Pinchbeck. Daniel is the author of 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, and most recently he is the co-editor of the anthology Toward 2012. Many people have heard of the phenomena of 2012. Daniel, I would say, is its literary father. There's a whole subgenre of books today on 2012. They began here at Tarcher with Daniel's first book. So we're going to talk to him a little about this theme, which is still very mysterious to a lot of people. We were talking earlier about how trends can be around for a long time before a majority of people are generally aware of them. So talk just a little bit about this idea of 2012, where it came from in antiquity, how you got connected with it today, and what it means to you.
The interest in 2012 was kind of spawned by the Mayan calendar, which was used by the classical Mayan civilization, which existed in Yucatan from the 2nd to the 9th century AD. And they were amazingly precise astronomers and stargazers and shamans, and it seems like a lot of their kind of emphasis over a long period was establishing the end of what's called the long count, which is a 5,200-year cycle. And they kind of, from what archaeologists have gleaned from studying their glyphs and their architecture and sculptures, they kind of arrived at December 21st, 2012 as the culmination of one cycle, potentially the beginning of another cycle. So what this actually means is still, argued by academics and so on, but a lot of people, some archaeologists and many kind of visionaries and kind of visionary philosophers think that they were pointing towards this time as the end of one world age, the beginning of the next. Because if you look at the Popol Vuh, they talk about these different world ages. So this would be the age of the fifth sun to the age of the sixth sun, as the Aztecs talk about, or from the fourth world to the fifth world. So I'd learned about this in a few different ways. One from the work of Terence McKenna, who arrived at it after a kind of overwhelming experience with psychedelic mushrooms in the Amazon, and then also from the works of Jose Arguelles, who kind of worked through the intricacies of the calendar and sort of created his own shtick on it in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not like a fundamentalist about the date being important. I mean, it's a long story. In fact, it's a 450-page book story. How I began to why I decided to take this material seriously and pursue it. I mean, I had a number of synchronicities myself around the date. I just noted correspondences with the sense of this kind of acceleration process that's kind of like exponential transformation of human culture and consciousness, which really does seem to be happening now.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book 2012, for instance, which came out in 2006, I'd actually discussed the potential for a socioeconomic meltdown around the year 2008. And then, to my shock, it seemed to have happened to a certain extent. So I think there are many things that are pointing towards the necessity of this rapid transformation in human culture and consciousness towards a more equitable and sustainable global civilization. And in a way, rather than being a fundamentalist about December 21st, 2012, for me it's a great opportunity to make use of that cultural meme to get everybody to like hurry up and get on the same page about what we know has to happen in any case.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a journalist. I do best with deadlines. So to have a big deadline like that is really helpful.
The ultimate deadline.
The ultimate deadline.
Now that's important. You mentioned you're a journalist, and that's another aspect to this story. Before you came to the theme of 2012, you were, in many respects, a mainstream literary journalist who wrote for places like New York Times Magazine, Wired, Rolling Stone, some of the fashion and art monthlies. You had to make a dramatic break in your own life when you began to seriously write about this subject matter.
Yeah, well, I mean, my break happened before I even thought about 2012. It happened when I wrote my first book, Breaking Open the Head, which was about shamanism and psychedelic substances. So I went through a kind of spiritual, existential crisis living in New York, working as a journalist. And at that point, I'd always been a secular materialist and had accepted, the scientific paradigm, that kind of was in a way kind of nihilistic, that, consciousness is entirely brain-based and so on. But then I kind of was in this depths of this spiritual crisis, and I began to ask myself, well, how did I know that, what the scientists were saying was true, because, they've been wrong before. We used to think the earth was flat, or whatever. So I decided to really look at some way to make a sort of ontological inquiry into the nature of consciousness. And then I remembered my psychedelic experiences from college, so I decided to make that the center of my journey for a while. And that led me to West Africa. I went through tribal initiation in Gabon and down to Ecuador, where I worked with Sequoia Indians in the Amazon, to visit the Mazatec Indians. I discussed all of this in 2012. And those experiences, the experiences working with these tribal shamans and the psychic experiences that happened kind of before, during, and after these events, along with a lot of, anecdotal and experiential material that I collected and reading that I did, led me to support this alternative paradigm that, actually maybe material reality is consciousness-based, And so the potential then for a kind of shift from a biological phase of evolution to a psychic phase of evolution seems to me plausible.
To some extent, you write about this in 2012, but I'll come at it in a slightly different way. Was there, sometimes when people experience a shift in their lives, they can look back and identify a single strike of a match that changed their path just a little bit, and that began something inside them. Was there a single moment where you came upon something, suddenly felt like a match was lit in the darkness, something made you begin to question the paradigm the materialist paradigm that you'd been involved in before?
There was like a dozen different match strikes, and each one, because I'm like kind of slow and stupid in a way, so it took me a while to, really accept the kind of things that were happening and to kind of open. I had to keep going. I would have like an experience of a shaman telling me something about my family history that he had no access to, perfectly describing something. And, I would take that in, then I would have another experience of a synchronicity or all sorts of things. But it was really over time, there was like a series of events that shifted my belief system, There were definitely, some watermark events like smoking dimethyltryptamine for the first time, DMT being a plant-based psychedelic that's also in our brains and spinal columns, and if you extract it and smoke it, it sort of shoots you out of your body for 5 to 10 minutes into an extremely convincing, other dimension of reality. And then you have to kind of reorient yourself to this kind of alarmingly overwhelming presence of this proximate other reality. So that was one experience, going down to the Amazon with this tribal group, Sequoia, and seeing what the oil companies were doing to the Amazon in relationship to the preservation of this like indigenous spiritual knowledge and so on. That was another kind of match strike. So there was a whole number. The 9/11, the towers falling was another one.